All right, welcome to the Snyder Report podcast. I am your host, as usual, Gary Snyder. The lovely Mrs. Snyder is taking a PTO day. She takes a lot of those. Not complaining, but oh well. Before we get to our next guest, which you can kind of see right next to me here, so I guess it's not a big surprise for anybody that's watching, we need to thank our sponsors. First up is Robin Winston. He has been a great sponsor of the newsletter. He was there when we sent out the first newsletter of 147 subscribers. We're now over 100,000. So thank you, Robin Winston. He's instrumental in getting this podcast rolling. Next up is our good friend, former Congresswoman Jill Long Thompson. Her book, Across the Aisle, Why Bipartisanship Works for America, is out. You can get that anywhere books are sold. And finally, our newest sponsor, we need to thank Congressman Andre Carson. He has been with us from the start on the newsletter and now joining us over here on the podcast. So thank you to all of our sponsors, because without them, we wouldn't be here. Now, joining me today is Representative Ed Delaney. Ed, welcome.
Thank you, Gary. Good to be here on an interesting day in Indiana politics.
You know, we're getting a lot of those lately.
Yeah, too many.
You know, combine that with the national, I just don't know what to talk about anymore.
We'd rather just have radio silence for a while, but that's not going to happen.
Well, we wanted to bring you on today for a couple reasons. Obviously, the budget came out yesterday. We wanted to get your thoughts on the budget as it stands right now, as it goes for final approval. So just your thoughts right now on the budget.
Well, if you don't believe in public activity, don't believe in public government, it's a great budget. But if you believe that the government has responsibilities to universities, to public education, to local government, then it's a really bad budget. And I'm afraid it's a response. It's a result of years of neglect of our budget that's just reaching a crescendo this year. So I'm very, very disappointed by this budget. It's probably the worst one I've seen. And I think it's a fairly poor response to the national economic problems.
You know, I saw a quote, I think it was from Michael Hicks from Ball State University, that said that this is the largest tax shift away from the wealthiest and businesses to the backs of hardworking Hoosier families. Would that be correct?
That's a fair statement, because we're going to put it on the homeowners, although with a little sort of gentle hiss to the homeowners before we hit them again. And we're going to shift away from business, and we're going to put more pressure on local government, and we're going to ignore public education. And in case the federal government isn't doing enough to dampen and attack higher education, we're going to add our swings to that. We're going to slug it a couple times.
You know, we do this podcast at my kitchen table. Now, to be fair, it's the dining room table, but you see it right here.
Yeah.
Right here. How does this budget, and you combine that at the national level, if you like, how does that affect Hoosier families that are sitting down at their kitchen table and deciding whether to pay their rent or to get their prescription drugs or feed their family?
Well, I think it does nothing for the needs of the working people, the ordinary middle-class people. There is some shifting. If you're making $250,000 at 25 years old, we'll give you help to get your kid into a private school. So we're going to help the people who least need it. We're not going to help the people who most need it. I'm worried about Medicaid, mainly because of the national impact and because I don't think we're prepared to deal with that. So I think that would be very concerning if I was on Medicaid or near Medicaid, or if I was on Obamacare. I'd be very nervous about where I'm going. I think the bigger problem is that we're doing nothing for our young people. They're living through a series of chaotic events, whether it's the Great Recession, they'd be now in their 20s, or whether it's the COVID crisis that we had, and now this tariff game that the president is playing. I think job security is very low. People are employed because of what happened over the last few years, but they're not secure in their jobs. I think that's the biggest concern I would have if I was a young family person. What's happening to my pension? How reliable is it? Forget today's numbers. What's happening to my health care? Is it at risk? And what's happening to public education? I think those things are all at risk, and for the ordinary family, those are critical.
When you take a look at what is happening at the state level, one thing that I've admired about you, just from looking, up here from the Fort Wayne area, and most of your Democrat colleagues at both the House and the Senate, You're small in numbers. You don't have a lot of say-so when it comes to what goes into the budget or what laws are passed here in Indiana. But you're very vocal. You put up a fight and you seem to fight for middle-class families. Talk about that fight and being in a supermajority or a super minority.
Well, it's very difficult in some ways. I mean, I was here briefly for 2 years. I was in the majority, a very slim majority. And we only had the House. We didn't have the governor or the Senate. No, it's a very hard position. The only thing you can do is make sure that what's happening is visible, okay? So there are some outrageous expenditures in the current budget I'll be talking about later in today. They need to be pointed out. So you bring visibility, and occasionally it works. I mean, we had a small victory the other day in the issue of sex education and whether our young people should be taught about consent. And we got the victory through, thanks to our communication staff, we got the victory through the social media. So we've got to learn how to use that outside factor to weigh in and help us be stronger. And I think there's something going on there. So I'm a little bit encouraged about that. I'm not encouraged by the overall discussion of what public institutions are for. I mean, why are we tearing down our universities, especially IU? For some reason, IU gets singled out for excess attention from the General Assembly. Where are we going?
Are they all Purdue fans? Is that the problem?
Well, I think Purdue plays a nice game of saying, well, we don't have a lot of liberal arts students, and if we have a demonstration, it's not very big. And, they play the inside game. IU tries to play the inside game, but it's stuck with the outside game, which is the game it ought to be playing. And so we have science research going to be cut. We have attacks, apparently, on our international studies programs. I think they're coming next, which has been a national asset. That is not just an asset for the Indiana University. It's a national asset. I taught down there briefly. I had CIA agents in my class because of the subject I was teaching. Mm-hmm. We have people who learn foreign languages, who learn to travel abroad and work abroad. We had all that. That was good for our country, and that's all being attacked because apparently whatever the hell woke is, IU is woke. So it must be punished. I find this a sad moment.
One thing that you've been instrumental in calling out has to do with Diego Morales and the Secretary of State and him hiring his brothers and the bonuses. That's just one example. You can look at the luxury SUVs. You can look at the helipad at the governor's personal residence. Just take a second and talk about, those elite, I guess, issues that they seem to think they're so elite that they can get these things while the rest of us are suffering the burden of that.
Well, look, egos are important. Egos need to be held in check. They're not held in check when there's a supermajority. That's the core problem. The core problem behind all of this is redistricting, so that both parties, in my view, are incredibly weak compared to what they were 50 years ago. Both parties. But one has been captured by a small group of big-time investors. I call them investors. Some people call them political donors. I call them investors who've done a very good job. And they'll find a guy like Morales, put him in office, and then he decides he's entitled to get whatever the heck he wants. I mean, that's what's going on. And the other part is the secrecy crowd, the economic development crowd. They think that everything they do is secret and important. I think half of it's not at all important, and too much of it is secret with different perspective. So they then run around and make friends and deals, and we just have to get rid of the supermajority. And the only way to do that is redistricting, but we don't have a referendum system in this state. So I think eventually our courts will say that this has just gotten out of whack. It is out of whack, and that we need to have real competition. And if we have real competition, we'll have better performance.
Ed, can you hold with us through the break?
Sure.
All right, this is the Snyder Report podcast. We'll be back in just a moment.
It's rock and roll. It's racing. It's Miller Lite Carb Day. Co-headlined by the All-American Rejects and Bret Michael. Friday, May 23rd at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Following the final Indy 500 practice and the Pit Stop Challenge. Concert, pit, and VIP tickets available now at ims.com.
All right, we're back here with State Representative Ed Delaney. Ed, we've walked through the budget a little bit. You had some comments in a press release yesterday about the IEDC and the transparency that goes on there. First of all, we're political insiders. Not a lot of people may know what the IEDC is. Can you just take a minute and explain that to us?
We've had a history of trying to figure out how to give incentives to businesses to come to Indiana, and the response created under Governor Daniels was a thing called the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, which is what's called a quasi-governmental organization, which is a nice way of saying we fund it, they run their own lives. Very dangerous concept. So that has gotten to the point where there's just simply too many conflicts of interest involved. One of the things that's really fascinating to me, I don't like this word transparency. I like the words ethics and disclosure. Well, they don't seem to be bothered by ethics at this commission, which has millions of dollars to spend. And apparently, they don't bother to file the disclosures that are required. I have to give Governor Braun credit. He's told them, file your disclosures as to these various organizations. There's a foundation that supports this IEDC. There's related entities that get money from it. He said, hey, file your disclosures. We're not waiving you on your disclosures. So that's the absolute minimum thing, which they haven't been doing for years. So we really don't know what's going on there. Legislators are not briefed on the activities. We don't have a mechanism to be inside it. And everything is stonewalled on the basis that we might leak some information about a big deal that's going to come to Indiana. As a result, we can spend millions of dollars and build up all kinds of staff and all sorts of conflicts of interest while we try to get these wonderful prizes, many of which were coming here without any efforts, okay? We have a geographical advantage. We have an advantage in terms of our tax structure. People are coming here. So we spend millions of dollars trying to get one more company to come here, and meanwhile we hide the activities of the funders and the people giving out the tax credits and the tax breaks.
What would you like to see the IEDC to be more ethical and more disclosure?
Let's start the simplest. Let's make sure they file their required documentation so we do know. Secondly, we have to create a mechanism for legislative oversight. We're not good at it. We don't do a lot of oversight, but this is one agency that has, shall we say, large amounts of money and very little direction as to how the money is to be spent. We need to have the legislature actually monitor it and be informed. And yes, we can keep secrets. If they've got a real hot deal, we don't want to blow that up. But somebody's got to explain why we own 9 or 10,000 acres of land that we paid too much for in Boone County. Where is that going? It's like it died. Well, it died with a big fat wallet in its pants, and the wallet had my money in it. So I'd like to resurrect it, find out what's going on. So let's do some oversight.
Now, you said legislative oversight. How do you structure that to where it's just not a handful of hand-picked supermajority Republicans on that?
Well, you have to have a structure that has two parties involved. It's just that simple. And otherwise you can't do the oversight. And the Congress in the national intelligence area has figured out how to monitor while keeping the necessary secrecy in defense areas. We can do the same here. But yeah, you'd have to have both parties. We have an ethics committee system here, which fortunately doesn't get called on too often, but when it does, it's balanced between the two parties. We know how to do these things, and we could do it. The problem is there is what I call the economic development industry in this state. They're everywhere. You know, they make their living by creating so-called tax increment districts, by selling municipal bonds, by getting tax credits, by getting companies to come here and look at our locations. You know, much of that is useful, but much of it is not useful, and much of it costs an awful lot of money. And when it's public money, we need to look at it. If private businesses want to invest in that enterprise, go right ahead. But the state's money is different qualitatively, I think. So, yeah, I think we could get this done. And I think we're moving in that direction. If some of the inquiries that are going on about this IEDC lead to the disclosures that I'm afraid are going to come, there'll be more pressure to do something. Look, when you're in the minority party, you got to push for reform. You got to push for oversight. You got to push for disclosure. That's what I try to do. And I think the public is catching on that if we don't have those things, we pay a price.
Before we let you go, Representative Delaney, is there anything else that you wanted to cover that maybe I have not asked you yet?
Well, I think the budget is critical. And we had two choices. We could either go the Indiana way or we could go the Trump way. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the budget says, don't worry about the poor people, beat up on the universities, and feather the nests of your friends. So it's the exact wrong response.
Before we let you go, we need to remind everybody of our sponsors. First of all, Robin Winston, a great sponsor, has been there from the start on the newsletter to now over 100,000 daily subscribers. Also, Jill Long Thompson, her newest book, Across the Aisle, Why Bipartisanship Works for America, is out there. Make sure you get that anywhere you buy your books. And also our newest sponsor, Congressman Andre Carson. He's been there from the start on the newsletter, and we welcome him now to the podcast. Also, there's a subscribe button just below. Make sure you hit that, and that way you get updates anytime we launch a new podcast. And make sure you hit the like button if you're watching this. Leave us a comment, even if it's nasty. I know a lot of you do. We'll have a mean comment or tweets podcast. That should be interesting. I'm Gary Snyder. He is not. He is Representative Ed Delaney. We are out.
Thanks.